Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be checking out this new, very long-awaited release from contemporary progressive rock legends Porcupine Tree, Closure and Continuation. Porcupine Tree have until this point been on hiatus since 2009's The Incident, with their final performance in 2010 at the Royal Albert Hall in London. A hiatus that the band was seemingly not anticipating, with Steven Wilson stepping away from the fold to pursue a more close-to-the-chest solo career that over the past decade has become a very interesting, ever-evolving collection of albums that in the past few years have become particularly pop-oriented. Steven Wilson's last solo album, of course, being The Future Bites from 2021, a mostly tongue-in-cheek but still very clean-cut analysis and criticism of consumer culture and identity and its blend with advertising. That was an album that I thought was overall a pretty decent listen. I am glad that Steven has been using his solo projects as a bit more of an outlet for sounds that maybe wouldn't fly as much in a group like Porcupine Tree. So it's interesting and almost surprising as a result that with the long-awaited return of Porcupine Tree, that this album, while so far removed from their previous catalog, still fits very comfortably within it. And I really did have my doubts when this album was announced. I mean, 13 years is a very long time for any band, and like you see with certain big progressive acts, there can be a lot of overblown hype that leads to some serious critical flaws becoming a lot more apparent than they usually would. But in the case of Closure Continuation, this feels more like an album that not only feels like a proper Porcupine Tree release, but succeeds in building and generally improving on the formulas that the band have been working on over decades. Now, this album does have some ups and downs, but generally speaking, any issues that this album does have are pretty similar to any issues that I've had with previous Porcupine Tree releases, namely a lot of like the post-2000s albums, which are generally a pretty good collection of releases, but have a tendency to lean into some of the more played out, kind of heavy breakdown tropes that go on a little bit too long, or just kind of a consistent, long-winded section in many of the tracks on those releases. In this case, there's not as many of those, but they still kind of pop up here and then. But with that being said, even those issues here are fairly minor because the pacing and the framing of any parts like that kind of keep things moving along pretty decently in a way that doesn't really feel like it wastes your time. I do feel like this album pretty successfully blends a lot of the more modern prog metal elements with the spacier psychedelic 90s side of their discography. There's parts like on Rat's Return that give me flashbacks to Deadwing and moment-to-moment pull from sounds that were toyed with on like Up the Down Stair. One of the things that I found kind of weird and interesting for this release, and one of the things that I also think is a little bit more of a detriment, is that the album is officially 7 tracks long, from Harridan to Chimera's Wreck, a pretty solid run from top to bottom in my opinion, but the deluxe version includes 3 extra tracks, which, mind you, the deluxe edition is the only one available on Spotify, so the songs Population 3, Never Have, and Love in the Past Tense all are technically not standard album tracks, which I guess makes sense with how they are placed right after the main 7 tracks, but those songs don't really feel like leftovers. They really feel a lot more intentional than that, and I wish they had been a little bit more wisely dispersed into the track listing. And that probably is one of the larger gripes that I've had with this album, for it to not finish on Chimera's Wreck for probably the majority of listeners is kind of a bad move, especially because Chimera's Wreck is such a fantastic closing song. I mean, it really is just like progressive rock Kino. As far as other great tracks go, I absolutely adore the track Dignity. It feels like a proper blend of Wilson's solo work up until this point, and also some of like the mid-era Porcupine Tree work. The vocal tracks on this song are produced brilliantly with some really excellent, dense layering on pretty much every verse and chorus in various points. Also, something else to mention, the production on this album, as expected, is flawless. I mean, it's not really surprising, but man, the guitars and the drum work, I mean, everything everything is so well balanced and kind of exactly where it needs to be in the mix. I'm also consistently impressed by Steven Wilson's ability to blend and layer so many wet and dry tones while not losing clarity in any of those tones, like the track Herd Culling, which swings from both ends of the spectrum in a really sweeping and dramatic show of technical execution. And man, the highs that Steven Wilson is hitting on this song just careen into some really amazing crashing verses that I just love. Something else that I've been kind of caught up on too is how they kind of ease you back into the whole Porcupine Tree style. The first track, Harridan, I initially found a little bit underwhelming and at points a little bit uninspired, but just because of how seemingly by the numbers that track is, I mean, I do like that they've placed these songs in a way that seems to kind of wade deeper and deeper into newer, maybe fresher ideas while still feeling fairly grounded. And even moments on the album that feel maybe a little bit too foreign and maybe like too much of a departure, like Walk the Plank, still feel very calculated and feel like proper, admirable risks. Even though this track does feel like a little bit of a net dip in quality, I think the writing is a pretty respectably interesting piece of work. And like I said earlier, the final proper track on this album, Chimera's Wreck, is an absolutely fantastic album closer with a lot of really great multifaceted segments. This song really bleeds like a lot of classic progressive rock influences with an intro that makes me think a lot of like 70s era Rush and even some like Led Zeppelin. And like a Chimera, this song seems to center around many different moving parts that all develop, albeit a little bit slowly, and come together surprisingly gracefully over the course of this 9.5 minute or so song. I do also really appreciate this track's restraint when it comes to like heavy breakdowns and turning into like a progressive metal track midway through the song, like some of their older work. Like off the top of my head, I'm thinking like Arriving Somewhere But Not Here. This one feels a lot more like a proper prog rock track, which I am very happy about. I can't say that I was surprised that this album was good, but I am admittedly kind of surprised that this album wasn't just incredibly mid. And you know, I'm really glad that this comeback album does feel like a proper, well thought through offering and not just a nostalgia grab. I doubt Steven Wilson would ever really go as far as to put out a release like that, but it's kind of hard to say in today's world. I'm very glad that there was a clear and worthwhile effort for this one. I'm thinking this album is a pretty solid 8. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe, and if you want to help the channel out more, check out my Instagram, my Reverb store, and my Depop. Links to those are in the description below. I also wanted to quickly address my absence before I end this video. Over the past year, I've been, seeing this channel grow quite a bit faster than I was expecting, and I was really cranking out as many uploads as possible for a while. And, for a while that was pretty fun, but I was kind of starting to feel a little bit of a drag and a little bit of the passion slip, and a lot of my opinions I felt weren't as thought through because a lot of the albums I was covering I didn't feel like I really had much to say on. So I'm not stopping my uploads. I will absolutely still be uploading reviews, but I'm going to be a little bit more selective about which albums I talk about because I am very simply not suited to discuss certain genres or certain bands because I very simply don't have a meaningful input in many specific areas, and I want to touch on the things that I know best. So I really hope that that works for you guys, and I really appreciate you all so much. Thank you all so much for watching over the past couple of years. I'm really looking forward to putting out more good quality content for reviews for everyone, and I value your time a lot, and I really don't want to waste any of it. So with that being said, thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.